Now that you've heard the research behind the 4 pillars of effective feedback and rubrics, let's dive into a tool we can use to provide feedback, the student-designed rubric. A student-designed rubric is exactly what it sounds like, a rubric that is designed by the students. This comes with teacher involvement and direction, but the students are the ones who drive the conversation and decide what language should be used for each rubric category. These rubrics are not to be evaluated. They are used as part of the formative assessment to help students understand teacher feedback. The student-designed rubric helps you take the first step into grading freedom. It also fits into all parts of the STEP acronym. Rubrics in general are specific and allow for timely feedback. The student-designed rubric is written by the students and therefore will be easily understood, and their involvement promotes personal responsibility to reading and understanding the expectations. These steps are helping your students become more metacognitive, which is proven to help them become better writers. So, here's what this looks like in a classroom. We will use the acronym RUBRIC. Rubric, understand the standard, buddies, review it, and copies. First, provide a blank copy of the rubric to each student, digital or print, with the standards written out in the left column. Since we want to keep our grading specific, we need to make sure our rubrics only assess 1 to 2 skills. If you wanted to take this a step further, you could have students identify which standards the assessment is assessing. That would give them even more insight into the expectations of the task and increase their metacognitive abilities and self-regulated learning. Second, understand the standard. Discuss or break down the skill or standard being assessed within this assignment. The language of standards can often be difficult for students to grasp, so your first task is breaking down the standard into easily understood language that is specific to the assignment. You can do this by simply paraphrasing the standard for your students and allowing students to ask questions. Third, buddies. Place students in groups to work on one outcome at a time. Allow a few minutes for groups to discuss what the outcome should look like, and then ask for students to share with the class what their groups discussed. 4. The fourth step is to review it. Write down what a few students share until all aspects of the skill or standard have been covered. Present it on the board and use the language they use. If there are issues you need to fix, work as a class to adjust the language so it is specific. Generic language will only confuse students when they are referring back to the rubric for feedback. 5. Class copies. Once you have created the class rubric for the assignment, print or make the rubric digitally accessible to all. Since you will be monitoring and controlling the final outcome of each rubric, it is totally acceptable for your different class periods to use slightly different language in their rubrics. The standard is the same, and you have ensured that all aspects of the rubric are written accurately. Once I began my own research study in my classroom on the student-designed rubric, my findings were incredible and so encouraging. I was truly blown away by what I saw. Even after just one time of creating a rubric together, I noticed a positive shift. I was so excited to see my students work harder on their assignments than ever before. I saw students who typically took 45 minutes of a 52-minute class period to write 1 word on their paper begin their assignments within 10 minutes of class beginning. Students who were often lollygagging and then rushing at the end of class to finish their assignments were utilizing their time so effectively they had a few minutes to spare at the end of class. While at first this new method looked like it was going to take up precious class time to create the rubrics together, it actually improved student focus, efficiency, and quality of work. By involving your students in the development of expectations, they gain a deeper understanding of the assignment and can begin to visualize an advanced product instead of rushing through a project and reverting to meeting the bare minimum requirements for an assignment. Now, here are some pointers for how to go about creating a student-designed rubric. Teach your students about the standards and how to create a rubric. This will take a little bit of time, and any educator wanting to implement student-designed rubrics in their classroom needs to take that time into account and be patient with students as they adjust to this new strategy. Explain why the standards were created, where students can find them, online or in a student handbook, what the standard is expecting students to be able to do, and provide examples of what that looks like in assignments they may have already completed. Create appropriate descriptors for each outcome: advanced, proficient, below grade level, and far below grade level outcomes. You can use whatever language your school or program prefers: A, B, C, D, F, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, etc. We also want to make sure the descriptors are grade level appropriate and don't expect too much or too little of our scholars. I like to begin with proficient, or B, because that is usually a direct grade level restatement of the standard and creates a foundation for other levels. Then students work with their buddies on advanced, or A. Then I like to skip all the way down to F. My students had a little too much fun describing what an F looked like. And then I like to have my students describe a C. At the time, I was working at a school that did not assign Ds to assignments, so we had 4 levels to assess. You can do whatever works best for you and your school. Here's what this might all sound like during the lesson. So if a B looks like this, what would an advanced assignment look like? What would a failing assignment look like? And what would be worse than grade level, but not failing? I'm pretty sure the description of a failing grade was enough motivation for some students to avoid that level of work at all costs. I loved seeing the light bulb click on for students who previously didn't understand the varying levels of work. The difference between failing and passing finally clicked for some students. And those students who were often receiving B's or C's and really wanted to advance but didn't know how, finally got it. They used their understanding of the expectations to push themselves. One of the battles you may face is students using generic language like good and bad. This is a great teaching moment to demonstrate what the difference between a passing grade and a failing grade would be. For example, an A+ might have 0 grammatical or spelling errors, while an F might have so many grammatical and spelling errors that the writing is difficult to read and understand. This is a measurable concept that uses specific language. If the rubric uses generic language that is not concrete, such as good detail, then the question students will ask later is, what is good detail? The rubric should reflect the expectations of the assignment and explain exactly what good detail would look like. For example, 2 textual examples per paragraph and at least 2 sentences of analysis for each textual example that explains the meaning and answers the prompt. Here's another tip. Have fun with this process. One of my colleagues had a lot of fun with the rubric language. He told me of one rubric he created with his students that used thematic language. For example, one rubric was Star Wars themed. Instead of terms like advanced and proficient, they used Jedi Master, Jedi Knight, Padawan, and Youngling. What a fun way to engage your students and get them interested in rubrics. Do you need to have students create a rubric for every assignment? No. It's up to you how frequently you would like to implement these. You may find that you only need to create them for each new skill you assess, so you can reuse any rubrics you've already created together as a class. You might find your students benefit from reviewing the skill or standard every time they do an assignment. Or you might use them strategically throughout the year as checkpoints to help keep students on track with the expectations of the course. Our own research findings suggest that the student-designed rubrics allowed our students to practice metacognitive skills, which we know is proven to help students become stronger writers. Students had to assess the task in order to identify the various skills required of them in each assignment. This provided time for them to evaluate their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as plan or visualize the assignment, which could account for the increase in higher-level questions. Once they had time to process the entire assignment, they were ready to apply the strategies they needed in order to complete the assignment. Student-designed rubrics allow students to see the assignment from the instructor's point of view, to plan or visualize the different aspects of the assignment, and understand the expectations. These benefits lead to even more benefits, such as more time on task, positive behavior, higher level questioning skills, and higher academic scores. Just one of these is reason enough to take the time to implement student-designed rubrics in your classroom. I'd like to share a little bit more about each of these benefits. Because students spent extended time working with their peers to understand how the assignment would be assessed, they understood their tasks more clearly and spent more time on task. Students began working on their assignments sooner and continued working on their assignments without getting distracted so easily. They didn't lollygag or demonstrate task avoidance because they had a clear vision of what was expected of them and they knew how to achieve it. Instead of students struggling to begin an assignment and taking time to brainstorm due to confusion or lack of motivation, almost all students began working on their assignments within the first 5 minutes, no matter their level of expertise in the subject. When students were involved in the evaluation process of an assignment, they were more likely to understand the directions and therefore be able to begin the task sooner and stay on task throughout their work time. More time on task meant students exhibited more positive behavior. Because they knew what to do, they weren't so easily tempted to take out their phones, go to the bathroom, get up and walk around the room to chat with a friend, or distract others at their tables. This positive behavior meant I wasn't running around trying to keep students on task or burning through all my classroom management strategies. My students were focused and working hard, and therefore I felt like I had just become the teacher who worked really hard to teach each of my students how to be a good student. Students also asked higher level questions. Prior to student design rubrics, my students would ask questions about the directions that could be answered by rereading the directions or simply visualizing the assignment. However, for each assignment that students created a rubric, students asked higher level questions such as creative possibilities within the assignment, how to design a project, and my typically lower performing students began making connections between the reading and the current assignment all on their own. With all of these other benefits, it's no wonder their academic scores improved as well. The results from my own study indicated that when students design the rubric that will be used to assess their work on an assignment, they are able to perform better academically. More students earned A's when they designed the rubric for an assignment than in similar assignments before they began designing their own rubrics. And almost 0 students earned failing scores on their assignments. At first, the process of creating rubrics with your students may seem like it's going to take up valuable instructional time. However, this practice allows every student an opportunity to learn how to visualize an assignment and ask productive questions before beginning an assignment, and therefore you become a more effective teacher and your students can work more efficiently.